Well, here it is, the last couple of days of August, and frankly, I've kind of taken much of the month off in a lot of ways. I've been busy in a lot of ways, but business-wise, I don't know, a little off. I've done little to no blogging. I think I've posted one or two things since the beginning of August, including an interview I did a couple of weeks ago, and of course, this one it'll squeeze in barely by the end of the month. So the second podcast. Been working on, yard stuff. I'm building a fence in the backyard. Took a vacation to Monterey. My main computer died. My iMac, I know it's only 2 years old. It's in the shop. Hopefully it'll come back soon and be spiffy again. So I'm on I'm literally recording this with a 10 plus year old MacBook Pro. Yeah, it goes back a long way. It's so old I can't even put the last two operating systems from Apple on it. So yeah, Mac OS is, I don't know, several years old. But hey, this is Tim Patterson. This is Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. Mostly every 2 weeks, but like I say, this August has been a little off, and maybe we'll get back to the typical schedule in September. We'll see. Find us at TradeshowGuy.net, and of course the blog at TradeshowGuyblog.com. There we go. All right. So this week, I got a chance to catch up for an interview with a very funny and fun lady, Jan McInnis. She's at theworklady.com. She's a keynote speaker and author, comedian. She's been doing this for a long time. She decided after doing marketing for a long time, she said, I really want to try this other thing, being a comedian. And she's taken her on an interesting path. And she does a lot of events, keynotes, and things like that. So I figure it's in the event world. Let's give her a chance to talk about it. Should be kind of fun. And that's who we're talking to, Jan McInnis, here on this week's interview. Want to welcome to Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee, Jan McInnis. Good morning, Jan. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, when I saw what you did, I just thought, this would be a fun conversation. Keynote speaker, a lot of events and conferences and things like that. Comedian, author, former marketer. You've even written for like comedy shows or for TV and stuff, haven't you?
Yeah. Jay Leno to guest on the Jerry Springer Show. I've done a lot of writing.
I remember when I used to tell this little story. I ran into Jay Leno like walking 5 feet away as he was eating a corn dog at a race down in Laguna Seca. And so we always tell friends, hey, we ate lunch with Jay Leno.
I haven't even done that. I've met him, but that's about it.
So give me just like a thumbnail sketch of how you got to where you are now. And also, if you want to include that, how the pandemic has affected you.
Really? Pandemic? Really? No, we're over that, right?
Right.
Just had a cancellation
Fingers
today.
Crossed. Yeah.
You know what? I started, I always, as a kid, wanted to be a comedian. Was not the class clown, but just thought, if you got to do something for work, you might as well do something fun. So that sounded fun. And never pursued it until I went to college, graduated from Virginia Tech. And I remember the night of graduation, we went out for a dinner with my parents, my family, nice restaurant. And I remember thinking, now is not the time to tell them I want to be a comedian. So I zip it. I didn't say a word and went into marketing for about 12, 15 years. Still had the bug, still wanted to do it. I was living I grew up in the DC area. So I was living out there. And finally, I got up the courage and tried it. Got on stage at an open mic and got booked from that open mic. It was amazing. Had a couple of starts and stops before that, but really the first time I just said, this is it. I'm going to try it one more time. And that's it. And got booked to open for Kevin Nealon from Saturday Night Live. It's a big deal.
Wow.
Yeah, I still kept my day job for a couple of years. Did comedy on the East Coast. And finally decided, I'm going to give it a shot. One interesting thing, when I was working in associations at the time, so I had a lot of connections with the association community. I booked the Capitol Steps, which is a comedy singing troupe.
Yep, familiar.
At Capitol Hill. It's great, very. And at the time, I was working comedy clubs nights and weekends, and I remember handing them a check that night and saying, "Wow, this is for a corporate. There are 5 people in our group, and it was 25 years ago. But I'm thinking maybe there's a market for comedy at conventions and trade shows and stuff." And my comedian friends were like, no, there's just, private gigs at like Christmas time, holiday parties. But I kept it in the back of my head, I think there's something more here. And I got on the road with comedy and then kind of worked my way to corporate comedy, tripped my way into it, I'd have to say. Ended up doing corporate comedy. And then 2008, 2009 hit, recession. people were saying we still want comedy. We gotta have a message. And so I got into humor keynotes, keynotes on change and keynotes
Right.
on communications. And here I am.
Well, it's like I mentioned in the green room, I talk about the comedians that are comedians, magicians. I know that incorporate magic into their trade show presentations
Yeah.
because it's like 80% information and 20% entertainment, and
Yeah.
you've got to learn to mix the humor in with the message, which is obviously you've learned a way to do that, and you've been doing that for quite some time. So that's how you
Yeah.
got into speaking. What about conference organizers? How'd you get into that? I mean, you kind of alluded at that, but maybe we can dig a little deeper into that. So, how did you find those people? How do you work with them?
You,
What are they looking for? Is it
I
different with
sure.
everybody?
I did. I did pretty much. I got into it pretty much backwards. I got into working with speakers bureaus first, and
Mm.
was working with dozens and dozens of them. And then the recession hit, and I started. I didn't know you could do this on your own. and uh, and then I talked to my friend Kent Rader, and he said, "Yeah, you can get into do your own marketing because everything kind of was going away with a lot of the bureaus." And so I did. I started doing my own marketing. I always have a client call ahead of time when I with the organizer to find out about their group and to do a little customization just so I know. I love learning about the different groups.
Yeah.
You know, most people work in one or two industries their whole life. I get to work in 20, 15 different industries. Healthcare to education. So uh, working with the organizers, how do I find them? Combination internet, finding associations. I do a lot of association work, finding the associations you want to work with. I still work with some bureaus and agents. It's a real mix on finding them. Uh, that's probably I say that the comedy or the keynote is free. It's the you're paying me to fly there and travel there and all the marketing I do to get there. But once I book something with someone, I have a nice conversation with them. I have a little sheet that I go through and just says, what's about their group, what's their theme, all that good stuff. Try to find out what these people are dealing with, especially now. And we are still dealing with the pandemic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
So I'm
uh,
curious, is the kind of information you present to them really timely? In other words, if could you give the same thing today that you gave 5 years ago, almost word for word, or do those types of things change depending on what's going on in their industry?
well, I do have sections of my keynote that change
Right.
with who the group is and what's happening in the industry, and sections that stay the same. Um, my jokes are a lot the same because you
Yeah,
can tell a
sure. Yeah.
dieting joke that you did 10 years ago, and it's still applicable now. So I don't change it out that as much, but I do have a keynote on change. So obviously I have to do some change and communication. I talk about how to use humor in business, and that is a skill. Those tips are never going to change. I mean, obviously with the event, I try to find out what types of um, clients they're going after and that sort of thing, and I tailor it a bit to that. But that the tips are pretty solid on how to get humor in business, and we're not talking about being a comedian, but we're talking about just you're at a trade show, okay? That's a perfect time to practice humor. That's a perfect time because you're networking, and humor really is a muscle you got to practice. And it's a great time to when people come by your booth or whatnot to ask different questions. Not the "Hi, I'm Jan. What do you do for a living?" Blah blah blah. It's kind of boring and not memorable. There's ways you can kind of connect with people instantly. Get them to want to talk to you. Get them to want to come back, buy your product. If you can use a little bit of humor, don't you want to do business with someone that's kind of joking around a little bit, and you're more approachable that way, right? So there's ways to do that in at the trade shows.
Well, humor is really kind of different from person to person. It took me a long time to figure that out, that some humor can really be cutting and hurtful. So if you're trying to make a joke, sometimes you laugh at it, but someone else might not, you know. And I
you know,
suspect in a business setting that you kind of got to be on your toes with that. If you're naturally funny, or if you like to throw those things out, or if you're not, maybe it's more of a challenge. So how do you talk about that kind of
uh,
angle?
first of all, I say stay away from the hot topics: sex, drugs,
Right.
rock and roll, and politics. Probably,
Politics. Yeah.
stay away from the cheap shots. It's easy sometimes. People say I'll have a client call and they'll say, "Oh, make fun of her hair, or make fun of his divorce." I mean, I've had people say that. I'm like, no,
No. Yeah.
that's not funny. So I say use your common sense. Do the humor that you think is funny for you, but don't go for the cheap shots. Go, and don't worry so much about it not hitting. People focus so much on the humor not working, and it's not going to work. Do the humor. If you find it funny, you'll sell it, and you'll say it and have fun saying it. And most people in business aren't upset if you use appropriate humor, even if it doesn't get a big laugh. They aren't, oh, she's not funny. Um, they are if you're a comedian and you get on stage and you're not funny. Then people get a little
Yeah.
upset, in a comedy club. But in a business setting, they mostly appreciate you're trying to lighten the situation. And again, it shows that you're approachable and someone that they might want to do business with. So don't worry so much about bombing or not, or people laugh at different levels,
Yeah.
You get your accountants that laugh, here's where they laughed at down here, but I know that I've done shows for hundreds of accountants, and okay, that's how they're going to laugh. You get your marketing people who are used to laughing up here, and the laughs are great. But don't let that rattle you. Don't worry about that. Um, Try to add some levity, and people want to do business if you sound fun and interesting, and and you'll make a nice instant connection.
And I would guess if you're laughing at something, if people are laughing at a joke one time, but the next time they don't laugh at it, that kind of tells you something. If they stop laughing at something over time, then maybe it's time to move that out. But
Yeah, yeah. And you find humor in conferences and exhibits and all over the place. I mean,
oh yeah,
we're
yeah,
so used to going right into our booth and stand there and start looking around. I mean, grab the agenda, look at that, pull out the fun, the ironies and things like that. I mean, I find a lot of humor. I did an event one time where I was emceeing and I was also keynoting. The guy who spoke right after me was doing a program on right before me. He was doing a program on networking. Keith Ferrazzi, and the title of his talk was "Never Eat Lunch Alone." Right after him on the agenda was lunch on your own. It's like, come on, some of the stuff just writes itself, but we
exactly.
don't
That
look at
would
that.
that definitely did. Yeah.
Yeah,
So let's talk a little bit about networking, because to me, a laugh is an icebreaker. If you can get someone to smile even a little bit, boy, you've gone a long way to making a little bit more connection there. So how do you approach
right.
those types of things? Because I know a lot of people, I don't like to network. I've learned how to over the years, how to just go up to somebody and say, hey, how's it going?
Well, I'd ask funnier questions. Ask more memorable questions. It's a fun way to get people started. Hey, I don't know. So I tell people to practice their humor muscle by asking questions like, uh, what's your worst job you ever had? What's the worst job you ever had, Tim? What's the worst thing you ever did? We all had those bad jobs,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I'd have to think about that. But I remember working on a farm shoveling horse manure for a day.
Ah, there you go. There, that was a job, not a
That was
hobby,
pretty
right?
bad.
It's pretty bad.
Yes.
I did telemarketing. All right, I can have some fun with joking
I
about.
actually did that for like about 4 hours and said, I can't do this anymore.
I did it for 4 hours too, and I became a I did sold sides of people on the telephone. 4 hours. Yeah,
God, yeah.
I
It
quit
was,
after 4 hours, which gave me seniority, right?
I
Because
had a lot of
nobody
resistance.
nobody sells anything more than 4 hours. So
Yeah.
yeah. So ask them unusual question, something that's memorable, because it's so funny. I throw that out in my keynotes on communications, and there's someone else who's shoveled horse manure. I mean, and you get these fun connections, or something memorable, or that's the guy that did that. So ask different questions. Sure, you need
Right.
to know their name and their company and all that. It's on their name badge. But have some fun with different questions, and it'll give you some practice and make you a little more memorable and kind of break the ice a little bit.
Cool. And before we wrap it up, you've got a couple of books. I want to have you mention those.
Thanks. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
two books. One is on writing humor, finding the funny fast. It's how to create quick humor to connect with clients, coworkers, and crowds. And the other one is called Convention Comedian: Stories and Wisdom from 2 decades on chicken dinners and comedy clubs.
Kind of like a memoir in a sense. That one.
Yeah, yeah, and,
Yeah.
and every chapter has a little story, and then it has what I learned from that, because I feel like we have to learn from our experiences. So, what did I learn from that bad or good experience?
Well, cool. I'm speaking with Jan McInnis, and you are at, give me the website. I think I have it in front of me.
Theworklady.com.
Theworklady.com. It's all right there.
.com.
Keynote speaker, comedian, author, comedy writer, former marketer, and former telemarketer.
And now sitting on my couch until COVID's over.
Exactly. Jan, I really appreciate your time. Thanks again.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks again to Jan McInnis. Find her at theworklady.com. and everything you want to know about her there, the books and all of that stuff. About to wrap up this week's edition of Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. This week's One Good Thing is a book that I'm about 60% through. It's pretty cool. It's called Since We Fell, a novel by Dennis Lehane. I actually hadn't heard of the guy, but I started reading the description. I thought, well, this sounds kind of cool. The thriller. He also wrote, you might have heard these or seen the movies of them. Gone Baby Gone was a movie. Mystic River was a movie. Shutter Island, a lot of other stuff. World Gone By, Live by Night, Moonlight Mile. It's really an interesting book. Very well written. I'm just enjoying the heck out of it. So that's what this week's One Good Thing, Since We Fell by Dennis Lehane. And that wraps up this week's edition of Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. Have yourself a great week or two, and we'll do this again soon.